The cold spring rain pelted down on Phoebe Vance as she struggled to keep her horses on the treacherous mountain trail. She had been told by everyone in Silver Creek that traveling alone to Denver was foolish, especially with the late thaw making the paths unpredictable. But stubbornness ran in her blood. The wooden wheels of her cart skidded in the mud as lightning cracked across the darkening Colorado sky. Phoebe tugged desperately on the reins, but it was too late. The trail edge crumbled beneath the right wheel, sending her cart lurching sideways down the embankment toward the swollen creek below. "Whoa!" she cried, her voice lost in the thunderclap that followed. The horses whinnied in terror as the cart tilted, dumping her meager possessions into the rushing water. Phoebe held on as long as she could before being thrown from her seat. She landed hard in the mud, the wind knocked from her lungs, watching helplessly as her cart rolled completely into the creek, the current immediately catching it. Panic seized her as she scrambled to her feet. This was everything she owned: her supplies, her clothing, her father's pocket watch, and most importantly, the deed to her land. Without thinking, she waded into the frigid water. "Miss, stop right there," a deep voice called from behind her. Phoebe turned to see a man on horseback descending the slope with remarkable control. His black hat was pulled low against the rain, but she could see the determined set of his jaw beneath the shadow of his brim. "My papers," she called back, continuing to wade deeper. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, tethering his horse to a nearby tree before striding toward her. "That water's too strong. You'll get yourself killed." "I don't have a choice," Phoebe cried, now thigh-deep in the freezing creek. Before she could move farther, he caught her by the arm and pulled her back toward the shore. "I'm Ethan Abernathy. I'll help you recover what I can, but first, we need to get you warm and dry. You'll rest by the fire soon enough." His words, though commanding, held a gentleness that made Phoebe hesitate just long enough for him to guide her back to solid ground. She stole a glance at him, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of the stormy sky, and felt something stir inside her that had nothing to do with the cold. The rain continued to fall as Phoebe watched helplessly while her cart was carried farther downstream, eventually catching on a fallen tree that stretched halfway across the creek. The current threatened to tear it loose at any moment. "My horses," she said suddenly, looking around frantically. "They're there," Ethan said, pointing to where her team had run up the bank, reins dragging in the mud. "We'll collect them after we get you warm. I've got a camp about a quarter-mile back." "Can you walk?" Phoebe nodded, though her entire body trembled with cold. "I'm not some delicate flower that wilts at the first drop of rain, Mr. Abernathy." His mouth twitched with what might have been a smile. "Never said you were, Miss Vance, Phoebe Vance, Miss Vance." He nodded, then whistled for his horse. "You can ride, I'll lead." "What about my possessions?" She looked back at her cart, its contents being claimed by the current piece by piece. "The rain will pass by nightfall. We'll recover what we can when the water recedes a bit." He offered his hand to help her mount his horse. "Right now, getting you warm is what matters." Phoebe hesitated, then placed her hand in his. It was calloused but warm despite the cold rain. With one fluid motion, he hoisted her onto his horse. "I can lead my own horses," she insisted. Ethan nodded. "Suit yourself." He helped her round up her team, securing their reins. By the time they reached his camp, the rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but Phoebe was chilled to the bone. The camp was nestled beneath a rocky overhang that provided shelter from the elements. A small fire pit sat in the center, currently dormant. "It's not much," Ethan said, helping her down from his horse. "But it's dry." "It's perfect," Phoebe replied, her teeth chattering. Ethan worked quickly, tending to the horses before starting a fire. The flames caught quickly, and soon a small but warm blaze illuminated the space. He pulled a wool blanket from his saddlebag and handed it to her. "You should change out of those wet clothes." Phoebe raised an eyebrow. "With what exactly?" "Everything I own is currently being carried away by that creek." Ethan rummaged through his pack and pulled out a clean shirt and a pair of trousers. "They'll be too big, but they're dry. I'll turn my back." Phoebe took the offered clothing, surprised by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." True to his word, Ethan turned away, busying himself with preparing coffee. Phoebe changed quickly, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs of his much too large clothing. The fabric carried his scent pine, leather, and something uniquely him. "You can turn around now," she said, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders for extra warmth. Ethan glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the firelight. He handed her a tin cup of coffee. "It's strong." Phoebe took a sip and nearly choked. "You weren't exaggerating." "Never do," he replied, sitting across from her. "What brings you out here alone, Miss Vance? These trails aren't safe this time of year, especially for a woman traveling by herself." Phoebe stiffened. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "I can see that," Ethan said, his tone slightly sarcastic as he gestured toward the direction of the creek. She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "That was an accident that could have happened to anyone." "Maybe so," he conceded, "but my question stands." Phoebe sighed. "I'm heading to Denver. I have had papers that need filing with the land office there." "What kind of papers?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger, but something about his steady gaze made her continue. "My father died 3 months ago. He left me our ranch outside of Silver Creek. Some powerful men have been trying to force me to sell. I have the deed in my father's will, proving the land is legally mine. Or at least I did before my cart decided to go swimming." Ethan's expression darkened. "These men have names." "Harrison Blackwell and his associates. They own most of the valley already." Phoebe gripped her cup tighter. "They offered to buy the land for half what it's worth, said no woman could run a ranch on her own. When I refused, accidents started happening. Cattle breaking free, a small fire in the barn. And you thought traveling alone to Denver was safer than staying put." "I didn't have much choice. The deadline to register the deed is in 4 days. If I don't make it to Denver by then, Blackwell can contest my ownership." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know of Blackwell. Man has a reputation that stretches all the way to Wyoming." "You're from Wyoming?" Phoebe asked, grateful for the change in subject. Been drifting for the past few years. I work when I need money, move on when I get restless." "A true cowboy," Phoebe said with a small smile. "My father would have called you footloose and fancy-free." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Phoebe's smile faded. "He taught me everything about ranching, how to mend fences, birth calves, break horses. He never treated me any different because I was a girl. Said I had more sense than most men he knew." "Smart man," Ethan murmured, pouring himself more coffee. "So what's your plan now? Without those papers, you might have trouble proving your claim." Phoebe set her cup down with determination. "I'll recover what I can from the creek, then continue to Denver. I'll find a way to convince them." Ethan studied her for a long moment, the firelight dancing across his weathered features. "I'm headed that way myself. Might as well travel together. I don't need a protector, Mr. Abernathy." "Never said you did. But 2 sets of eyes are better than one when it comes to spotting trouble, and I've got some experience with land claims. Might be able to help." Phoebe wanted to refuse, to prove she could handle this on her own, but practicality won out. "Very well, but I pay my own way." Ethan nodded. "Fair enough. We'll head out at first light, see what we can salvage from your cart. Then it's a 3-day ride to Denver if the weather holds." As night fell completely, they settled into a companionable silence. Phoebe found herself studying Ethan when he wasn't looking. His hands were strong and capable as he maintained his gear, his movements efficient. There was something about him that intrigued her, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "You should get some rest," he said finally, catching her gaze. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Phoebe nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. She lay down near the fire, pulling the blanket tight around her. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy, for pulling me out of the creek." "Ethan," he corrected. "And you're welcome, Miss Vance." "Phoebe," she replied softly before closing her eyes. The last thing she remembered before drifting off to sleep was the steady sound of Ethan's breathing across the fire, and the strange feeling that despite everything that had gone wrong that day, something had also gone very right. Morning brought clear skies and a certain crispness to the air that hinted at the possibility of another storm. Phoebe woke to find Ethan already up, tending to the horses and preparing a simple breakfast of bacon and hardtack. "You sleep well?" he asked, handing her a plate. "Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the food gratefully. She was ravenous after yesterday's ordeal. They ate quickly, eager to reach the creek and assess the damage to Phoebe's cart and belongings. As they rode, Phoebe couldn't help but notice how at ease Ethan seemed in the saddle, his body moving in perfect harmony with his horse's gait. "How long have you been riding?" she asked. "Longer than I can remember," Ethan replied. "My father had me on a horse before I could walk properly." Said a man who couldn't ride wasn't much use on the frontier. "My father said something similar," Phoebe smiled. "Though he added that a woman who couldn't ride was at the mercy of men, and he didn't raise me to be at anyone's mercy." Ethan glanced at her with newfound appreciation. "Your father sounds like someone I would have liked to know." "Everyone liked James Vance," Phoebe said, her voice softening with memory. "He was fair and honest, treated everyone with respect, regardless of their station. The ranch hands would have done anything for him." "And now they work for you," Phoebe's expression clouded. "Most left after he died, said they wouldn't take orders from a woman. Only Pedro and his son stayed on, and they're more like family than employees." "Their loss," Ethan said simply. They reached the creek to find the water had receded considerably overnight, leaving Phoebe's cart partially exposed where it had lodged against the fallen tree. Much of its contents had been swept downstream, but the wooden frame remained largely intact. Ethan dismounted and studied the situation. "We might be able to salvage the cart itself. It's not too badly damaged." Phoebe was already scanning the shoreline, looking for any sign of her belongings. "The deed could be anywhere. It was in a leather portfolio in my trunk." "We'll start here and work our way downstream," Ethan said pragmatically. "If it's to be found, we'll find it." They worked systematically, Ethan wading into the shallower parts of the creek to retrieve items caught in the rocks and vegetation along the banks. Phoebe combed the shoreline, collecting what she could: a few articles of clothing, some cooking utensils, a sodden book. After nearly 2 hours, Phoebe gave a cry of excitement. "Ethan, look!" She held up a waterlogged leather case, its contents miraculously still inside. Ethan hurried over, water streaming from his pants where he'd been knee-deep in the creek. "The deed!" Phoebe carefully opened the portfolio, her hands trembling slightly. The papers inside were wet but intact, the ink smudged but still legible. "Yes, and my father's will. They're damaged, but I think they'll do." Relief washed over her face, and without thinking, she threw her arms around Ethan in a spontaneous hug. He stiffened momentarily before his arms came around her, returning the embrace briefly. "We should dry those out properly," he said, stepping back, his voice gruffer than before. "Lay them in the sun while we see about your cart." With renewed energy, they turned their attention to the cart itself. After assessing the damage, Ethan determined they could repair it enough to be serviceable for the journey to Denver. "The axle's bent but not broken," he explained, pointing to the undercarriage. "We can straighten it enough to get you where you're going. Might not be pretty, but it'll hold." By midday, they had salvaged what they could of Phoebe's possessions, about half of what she'd been traveling with, and had made temporary repairs to the cart. The papers were laid out carefully on a flat rock to dry in the sun, weighted down with small stones to prevent them from blowing away. As they sat eating a simple lunch of jerky and dried fruit from Ethan's supplies, Phoebe studied him openly. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. "You don't know me. You could have just pulled me from the creek and been on your way." Ethan chewed thoughtfully before answering. "My mother raised me to help those in need, said a man's character is judged by what he does when no one's watching." "Is someone watching now?" Phoebe teased lightly. The corner of Ethan's mouth twitched. "Just you, Miss Vance." "Phoebe," she corrected, "and I think your mother would be proud." Something flashed across Ethan's face, pain, perhaps, before his expression returned to its usual stoic calm. "She died when I was 15. Fever took her." "I'm sorry," Phoebe said softly. "My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me after that." A moment of understanding passed between them, a shared grief that needed no further explanation. "We should get moving if we want to make good distance before nightfall," Ethan said, standing and dusting off his pants. "Papers look dry enough to pack up carefully." They loaded Phoebe's salvaged possessions into the repaired cart, securing the precious documents in an oilskin pouch Ethan produced from his saddlebag. "Just in case we hit more rain," he explained, handing it to her. Their journey continued at a steady pace, the mountain trail gradually giving way to rolling foothills as they made their way toward Denver. Phoebe found herself enjoying Ethan's company, his quiet presence reassuring rather than intrusive. He didn't feel the need to fill silence with idle chatter, but when he did speak, his observations were thoughtful and often insightful. As the sun began to set, they made camp in a small clearing sheltered by a grove of pine trees. Ethan built a fire while Phoebe prepared a stew from their combined provisions. "You cook well," Ethan commented after his first bite. "Another skill my father insisted I learn. Said a person who can't feed themselves properly is always at a disadvantage. Your father was a man of many opinions." Phoebe laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise them both. "He certainly was. What about your father? You mentioned he had you riding young." Ethan's expression darkened slightly. "My father was a difficult man. Expected perfection, rarely gave praise. Had a heavy hand when he drank, which was often." "I'm sorry," Phoebe said, recognizing the pain beneath his matter-of-fact tone. Ethan shrugged. "He taught me to survive, at least. Left home at 16 after my mother passed. Haven't seen him since." "Is that when you started drifting, as you put it, more or less?" "Worked cattle drives, did some mining, even tried my hand at trapping for a while. Nothing felt right enough to stay." "And now, where are you headed after Denver?" Ethan poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks floating upward. "Haven't decided. Heard there's work in the Dakota Territory. Might head that way." Phoebe nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment she felt at the thought of him leaving. It was ridiculous. She'd known the man barely a day. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "After you register your deed, will you go back to running the ranch alone?" "I'm not alone. I told you Pedro and his sons help. And I'll hire more hands once I get back, men who don't mind taking orders from a woman." "Good luck finding them," Ethan said, though his tone held no malice. "The right people are out there," Phoebe insisted. "My father always said if you treat people with respect and pay them fairly, loyalty follows." Ethan nodded slowly. "Your father sounds wiser by the minute. He was, Phoebe said softly. I miss him every day. They fell into silence as the night deepened around them, each lost in their own thoughts. Phoebe found herself studying Ethan's profile in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected the flames. There was something about him that drew her a depth, a quiet strength that she found herself wanting to understand better. We should get some rest, Ethan said finally, breaking the spell. Another long day tomorrow, Phoebe nodded, settling into her bedroll. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Phoebe. As she drifted off to sleep, Phoebe wondered what it might be like if Ethan decided not to drift on after Denver, if he might find a reason to stay. The thought followed her into dreams filled with rushing water and a strong hand pulling her to safety. The next morning dawned clear and bright, promising good traveling weather. They broke camp efficiently, falling into an easy rhythm as if they'd been traveling together for weeks rather than days. As they continued their journey, the conversation flowed more freely between them. Tell me about your ranch, Ethan said as they navigated a particularly narrow stretch of trail. Phoebe's face lit up with pride. It's not the biggest in the valley, but it's good land. 300 acres of pasture, a creek running year-round, and some of the best grazing you'll find in Colorado. We run about 200 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. My father was one of the first to bring them to this region. Sounds like a fine operation. It is, or it was before. Phoebe trailed off, her expression clouding. Before Blackwell started causing trouble, Ethan finished for her. Phoebe nodded. He wants to consolidate all the smaller ranches in the valley, says it's the future of cattle ranching, but I think he just wants control. Men like that usually do, Ethan agreed. What's his play? Just intimidation, or has he tried other tactics? At first, he made what he called a generous offer. When I refused, the accidents started happening. Then he tried a different approach, sent his son to come courting. Ethan raised an eyebrow. His son, Phoebe rolled her eyes. Gregory Blackwell, a peacock in expensive boots who thinks every woman should swoon at his feet. He started showing up at the ranch unannounced, bringing gifts, inviting me to dinner. And you weren't interested? In a man who clearly sees me as nothing more than a means to get my land. Hardly. Phoebe's tone was scornful. Besides, he's exactly like his father believes women should be decorative and obedient, not exactly qualities I admire in a potential husband. Ethan's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I gathered you're not the decorative and obedient type. Perceptive of you, Mr. Abernathy, Phoebe replied with a mock formality that made him chuckle. So what happened when you refused the son as well? That's when things got worse. A section of fence was cut, letting half our herd wander onto Blackwell land. He charged me a hefty fee to return them. Then one of our barns caught fire mysteriously. Nothing I could prove, of course. Of course, Ethan agreed grimly. Men like Blackwell are careful to keep their hands clean. They rode in silence for a while, each absorbed in their thoughts. As they crested a hill, Denver came into view in the distance, its buildings a stark contrast to the natural landscape. We'll reach town by tomorrow afternoon at this pace, Ethan observed. Phoebe nodded, a mixture of relief and anxiety washing over her. She was one step closer to securing her land, but she also knew that reaching Denver meant parting ways with Ethan, a prospect that troubled her more than it should. That night, they camped within sight of the city lights. After dinner, they sat by the fire, the conversation turning to what would happen once they reached their destination. The land office closes at 4, Phoebe said, thinking aloud. If we arrive by noon, I should have plenty of time to file the paperwork. I know a clerk there, Ethan offered. Man named Sullivan, honest fellow, I'll introduce you. Thank you, Phoebe said sincerely, for everything. I'm not sure I would have made it this far without your help. Ethan shrugged off her gratitude. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You'd have managed. Perhaps. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. What will you do after Denver? Ethan poked at the fire, not meeting her eyes. Not sure yet. Might look for work around here for a while before heading north. Hope fluttered in Phoebe's chest. The ranch could use someone with your skills, if you're interested in work, that is. Now Ethan did look at her, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Are you offering me a job, Miss Vance? I suppose I am, Mr. Abernathy. Phoebe maintained his formal tone, though her heart was racing. Good ranch hands are hard to find, especially those who don't mind taking orders from a woman. And is that what I'd be? Just a ranch hand? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Phoebe felt her cheeks flush and was grateful for the darkness. That would be up to you, she answered finally, her voice softer than she intended. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I'll consider it. It wasn't a commitment, but it wasn't a refusal either. Phoebe nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at the non-committal response. Good, that's good. They fell into a silence that was no longer quite as comfortable as before, the air between them charged with unspoken words and feelings neither was ready to acknowledge. We should get some rest, Ethan said eventually, standing up. Big day tomorrow. Phoebe nodded, retreating to her bedroll. As she lay there, listening to the night sounds and Ethan's steady breathing nearby, she wondered if she had made a mistake in offering him a job. Perhaps it would have been better to let him go his own way rather than complicate things with her growing feelings. But as sleep claimed her, her last thought was that she wasn't ready to say goodbye to Ethan Abernathy. Not yet. They reached Denver just after noon the following day, the city bustling with activity. Phoebe had been to Denver only once before, years ago with her father, and she found herself overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. Ethan, sensing her discomfort, stayed close as they navigated the busy streets. The land office is this way, he said, guiding her cart through the throng. We can stable the horses at Johnson's livery. He's fair and won't overcharge. After securing the horses and cart, they made their way to the land office, Phoebe clutching the oilskin pouch containing her precious documents. Her stomach churned with anxiety. What if the damage to the papers was worse than she thought? What if they refused to accept them? Ethan seemed to sense her nervousness. It'll be fine, he assured her quietly as they approached the building. Sullivan's a reasonable man. The land office was crowded, men of all descriptions waiting to file claims or dispute boundaries. Phoebe was the only woman present, and she felt the curious stares as she and Ethan entered. Squaring her shoulders, she followed Ethan to a desk where a harried-looking man with spectacles was reviewing a stack of papers. Sullivan, Ethan greeted him. The man looked up, surprise giving way to recognition. Abernathy, didn't expect to see you back in these parts. Just passing through, Ethan replied. This is Miss Phoebe Vance. She needs to register a deed. Sullivan turned his attention to Phoebe, giving her a polite nod. Miss Vance, new purchase. No, Phoebe replied, finding her voice. My father's ranch. He passed recently, and I'm registering the transfer of ownership. Sullivan's eyebrows rose slightly, but to his credit, he didn't comment on a woman owning property. I'll need to see the deed and any supporting documents. Phoebe carefully removed the papers from the pouch, spreading them out on Sullivan's desk. The damage was visible water stains, smudged ink, but the essential information remained legible. Sullivan frowned as he examined them. These have seen better days. There was an accident on the trail, Ethan explained. Miss Vance's cart went into a creek. We salvaged what we could. Sullivan studied the documents more closely, adjusting his spectacles. The deed itself seems intact enough, and I can make out your father's signature on the will. He looked up at Phoebe. But there's a problem. The witness signatures on the will are badly smudged. Without clear verification, it could be contested. Phoebe's heart sank. What can I do? The deadline for registration is tomorrow. Sullivan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Who were the witnesses? Judge William Porter and Dr. Samuel Green, Phoebe replied promptly. Both from Silver Creek. Do you have any other documentation with their signatures for comparison? Letters, perhaps? Phoebe shook her head, desperation rising. Everything was in my cart. Most of it was lost in the creek. Sullivan looked genuinely sympathetic. I'm sorry, Miss Vance, but without verification of those signatures, I can't complete the registration. Rules are rules. Ethan stepped forward. What if we got telegrams from Porter and Green confirming they witnessed the will? Sullivan considered this. That might work, provided they respond before tomorrow's deadline. But telegrams can be expensive, and there's no guarantee they'll reply in time. We'll try anyway, Ethan decided, glancing at Phoebe for confirmation. She nodded gratefully. Yes, we'll send telegrams right away. Very well, Sullivan said. If you receive confirmation, bring it straight to me. I'll be here until closing today and from 9 tomorrow. Outside the land office, Phoebe fought to maintain her composure. The telegraph office is this way, she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Ethan touched her arm lightly. It'll work out, Phoebe. She looked up at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. I hope you're right, if Blackwell gets his hands on the ranch. He won't, Ethan said with quiet confidence. I promise you that. They sent telegrams to both Judge Porter and Dr. Green, explaining the situation and requesting immediate confirmation that they had witnessed James Vance's will. All they could do now was wait. We should find somewhere to stay for the night, Ethan suggested as they left the telegraph office. There's a decent boarding house on Walnut Street, nothing fancy but clean and reasonably priced. The boarding house was indeed clean if sparse. The proprietor, a no-nonsense widow named Mrs. Bailey, gave Phoebe a small room at the back of the house and directed Ethan to the men's quarters upstairs. No funny business in my establishment, she warned them sternly. I run a respectable house. Yes, madam, Ethan replied with perfect seriousness, though Phoebe caught the glint of amusement in his eyes. After securing their rooms, they headed to a nearby restaurant for dinner. The food was simple but hearty, and despite her anxiety about the telegrams, Phoebe found herself enjoying the meal and Ethan's company. Have you ever thought about settling down? She asked impulsively, immediately regretting the personal nature of the question. If Ethan was surprised, he didn't show it. Used to think I wasn't cut out for it. My father wasn't exactly a shining example of family life. But now, Ethan studied her across the table, his expression thoughtful. Now I think it might depend on the situation, the right place, the right circumstances. The way he looked at her made Phoebe's pulse quicken. She was about to respond when the restaurant door opened and a familiar figure stepped inside. Phoebe froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Gregory, she whispered, her appetite vanishing instantly. Ethan followed her gaze to the well-dressed young man surveying the room. Blackwell's son, Phoebe nodded, shrinking in her seat. What is he doing in Denver? Before Ethan could respond, Gregory spotted them. His initial surprise gave way to a practiced smile as he approached their table. Miss Vance, he greeted her, his voice smooth as silk. What a delightful coincidence, Mr. Blackwell, Phoebe acknowledged stiffly. This is Mr. Abernathy. Gregory barely spared Ethan a glance, his attention fixed on Phoebe. Father will be pleased to know you've reconsidered his offer. He sent me to Denver to finalize the paperwork at the land office. I haven't reconsidered anything, Phoebe replied firmly. I'm here to register my deed, not sell my ranch. Gregory's smile tightened. Come now, Phoebe. We both know a woman can't run a ranch successfully on her own. Father's offer is more than generous. Miss Vance seems to be doing just fine, Ethan interjected, his voice deceptively calm. Now Gregory did look at him, his gaze dismissive. And you are? A friend, Ethan replied simply. Gregory snorted. Well, friend, this is a private business matter between Miss Vance and my father. Actually, Phoebe said, finding her courage, there is no business matter to discuss. The ranch is not for sale, not to your father, not to anyone. Gregory's expression hardened. Father won't be pleased to hear that. He's quite set on acquiring your property. It would be a shame if further accidents were to occur. Ethan stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Though he was no taller than Gregory, there was something in his stance that made the younger man take a step back. That sounded an awful lot like a threat, Mr. Blackwell, Ethan said quietly. Gregory forced a laugh. Not at all. Simply an observation that ranching can be a dangerous business, especially for those without adequate help. He turned back to Phoebe. Think about it, my dear. Father's offer stands until tomorrow at noon. After that, he shrugged eloquently. With a curt nod, Gregory turned and left the restaurant, the door swinging shut behind him. Phoebe released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's not good. If Gregory is here, his father must know about the damaged papers. They could be planning something. Ethan sat back down, his expression grim. All the more reason to hope those telegrams come through. They finished their meal in subdued silence, the encounter with Gregory casting a shadow over the evening. As they walked back to the boarding house, Ethan stayed close to Phoebe, his eyes scanning the streets as if expecting trouble. You think we should check the telegraph office again? Phoebe asked as they reached Mrs. Bailey's establishment. They'll send a boy with any replies, Ethan assured her. Nothing more we can do tonight except wait. Phoebe nodded, though the thought of waiting through the night for news that might never come was almost unbearable. At the door to her room, she hesitated. Thank you, Ethan, for standing up to Gregory. Most men wouldn't have bothered. Most men are fools, Ethan replied simply. Then, surprising her, he reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will sort itself out one way or another. His touch left a trail of warmth on her skin that had nothing to do with the temperature. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Phoebe. Despite Ethan's advice, sleep proved elusive. Phoebe tossed and turned, her mind racing with worries about the telegrams, Gregory's threats, and the uncertain future of her ranch. And beneath all that, the confusing feeling stirring within her for a drifting cowboy she'd known less than a week. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke with a start to urgent knocking on her door. Disoriented, she fumbled for her robe and went to answer, finding Mrs. Bailey on the threshold, a telegram in hand. Just arrived for you, Miss Vance, the landlady said, handing her the envelope. Phoebe's heart raced as she tore it open. The message was brief but clear. Confirm witnessed will of James Vance stop all legal and proper stop arrive Denver noon tomorrow to testify if needed stop Judge Porter relief washed over her. At least one of the witnesses had responded. But what about Dr. Green? And would one confirmation be enough for Sullivan? Too agitated to return to sleep, Phoebe dressed and went to the small parlor where Mrs. Bailey served breakfast to her boarders. To her surprise, Ethan was already there, nursing a cup of coffee. You're up early, she said, joining him at the table. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Any news? Phoebe showed him the telegram. From Judge Porter, nothing from Dr. Green yet. Ethan read it quickly, then nodded. This is good. Porter's a judge, his word carries weight. Sullivan should accept this. I hope so, Phoebe said, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Bailey brought her. What time is it now? Just after 6, Ethan replied. Land office doesn't open until 9. The telegraph office opens at 7. We should check if there's anything from Dr. Green. They finished their breakfast quickly and waited impatiently for the telegraph office to open. When they arrived, the operator informed them that no further messages had arrived for Phoebe. Let's head to the land office, Ethan suggested. We can show Sullivan the telegram from Judge Porter and see if it's enough. The land office was just opening when they arrived, clerks setting up for the day's business. Sullivan was already at his desk, sorting through papers. He looked up as they approached. Miss Vance, Mr. Abernathy. Any luck with those telegrams? Phoebe handed him Porter's message. From Judge Porter, we haven't heard from Dr. Green yet. Sullivan read the telegram carefully, his expression thoughtful. This confirms one witness, which is better than none. But ideally, we need verification from both signatories. The judge is arriving at noon today, Phoebe pointed out. Surely his in-person testimony would be sufficient. Sullivan hesitated. It would certainly strengthen your case, but the deadline for registration is today. What if we start the paperwork now, with the understanding that Judge Porter will provide additional verification when he arrives? Ethan suggested. Sullivan considered this. I suppose we could begin the process, with final approval contingent on the judge's testimony. But there's still the matter of, he was interrupted by a commotion at the front of the office. They turned to see Harrison Blackwell himself striding in, flanked by Gregory and another man Phoebe didn't recognize. Sullivan, Blackwell called, his voice carrying across the room. I need to speak with you about the Vance property. Sullivan sighed. It appears this just got more complicated. Blackwell spotted Phoebe and Ethan and altered his course to intercept them before they could reach Sullivan's desk. He was a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed Phoebe with calculating interest. Miss Vance, he greeted her, his tone falsely cordial. My son mentioned he ran into you yesterday. I trust you've had time to reconsider my offer. There's nothing to reconsider, Mr. Blackwell, Phoebe replied steadily. The ranch is not for sale. Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understand your emotional attachment to the property, my dear. Your father built it from nothing quite admirable, but sentiment is poor business. My offer is more than fair. The ranch is my home and my livelihood. No amount of money would be fair for that. Blackwell's expression hardened slightly. I see. He turned his attention to Ethan. And who might you be? Another drifter Miss Vance has charmed into her service. Ethan met the older man's gaze unflinchingly. Just a friend making sure Miss Vance gets what's rightfully hers. Indeed, Blackwell raised an eyebrow. Well, friend, you should know that what's rightfully hers is in question. I have information that James Vance's will may not be legally binding. Phoebe felt a chill run through her. What are you talking about? The third man in Blackwell's party stepped forward, producing a document from his briefcase. Harold Jenkins, attorney at law. I have here a statement from Dr. Samuel Green indicating that he did not, in fact, witness James Vance's will as claimed. Phoebe gasped. That's a lie. Dr. Green was there. He and Judge Porter both witnessed my father signing his will. Jenkins shrugged. According to this sworn statement, Dr. Green's signature was forged. Without two valid witnesses, the will is contestable. This is ridiculous, Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. Judge Porter confirmed his witness by telegram, and he'll be here at noon to testify in person. One witness is insufficient under Colorado territorial law. Jenkins replied smoothly. And in the absence of a valid will, the property should go to public auction, as Mr. Vance had no male heirs. Sullivan, who had been listening to the exchange with a troubled expression, stepped forward. "Let me see this statement from Dr. Green." Jenkins handed over the document. Sullivan adjusted his spectacles and read it carefully, his frown deepening. "This appears to be in order," he said reluctantly. "But given Judge Porter's conflicting telegram and impending arrival, I think it best to delay any decision until we can hear his testimony." Blackwell's expression darkened. "The deadline for registration is today, Sullivan. If Miss Vance cannot provide conclusive proof of her ownership, the property must be released for auction as per territorial law." "There's still time before the deadline," Sullivan replied firmly. "I will not make a ruling until Judge Porter has been heard." Blackwell looked like he wanted to argue further but thought better of it. "Very well. We'll return at noon to hear what the judge has to say." He turned to Phoebe, his expression cold. "My offer still stands, Miss Vance. Think carefully about your options." With that, Blackwell and his party departed, leaving a tense silence in their wake. "What just happened?" Phoebe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sullivan sighed heavily. "It appears Mr. Blackwell has convinced Dr. Green to recant his witness statement." "Without two valid witnesses, the will's legality is indeed questionable." "But that's impossible," Phoebe insisted. "Dr. Green was there. He signed right after Judge Porter at my father's bedside." "Something isn't right," Ethan agreed. "Blackwell must have gotten to Green somehow." Sullivan looked troubled. "It's not my place to speculate, but I've heard rumors that Dr. Green has a gambling problem if Blackwell holds markers against him." "He could pressure him into lying," Ethan finished grimly. "What can we do?" Phoebe asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We wait for Judge Porter," Ethan replied, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. "His testimony will carry significant weight, especially against a doctor with potential gambling debts." Sullivan nodded. "Mr. Abernathy is right. Judge Porter's word as a man of law will be difficult to dismiss. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare any other evidence you might have of your father's intentions regarding the property." They left the land office with heavy hearts, the morning's hope dimmed by Blackwell's interference. As they walked back toward the boarding house, Phoebe struggled to process what had happened. "I can't believe Dr. Green would lie about this," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "He delivered me as a baby. He was my father's friend for 30 years. Ethan's expression was grim. "Desperate men make poor choices if Blackwell has leverage over him." "It's just so wrong," Phoebe said, anger replacing her initial shock. "My father wanted me to have the ranch. Everyone in Silver Creek knows that." "And we'll prove it," Ethan assured her. "Judge Porter will set the record straight." They reached the boarding house to find another telegram waiting for Phoebe. This one was from Pedro. Her remaining ranch hand strangers asking questions about deed stop, tried to enter house stop Miguel, and I standing guard stop return quickly stop Blackwell's men, Phoebe said, handing the telegram to Ethan. "He's covering all possibilities. If he can't block my claim legally, he'll try to find evidence to support his case or destroy evidence that supports mine." Ethan read the message, his jaw tightening. "We need to resolve this today. Once your claim is officially registered, Blackwell will have a harder time contesting it." They spent the morning reviewing Phoebe's remaining documents, looking for anything that might strengthen her case. Around 11:30, they headed back to the land office to await Judge Porter's arrival. The office was busier now, filled with men filing claims and arguing boundaries. Sullivan motioned them over to his desk. "Any sign of the judge?" he asked. "Not yet," Ethan replied, but the train from Silver Creek should arrive any minute. No sooner had he spoken than the door opened, and Blackwell entered with his son and lawyer in tow. They took positions near Sullivan's desk, Blackwell acknowledging Phoebe with a curt nod. The minutes ticked by, tension building with each passing moment. Noon came and went with no sign of Judge Porter. By 12:30, Blackwell was looking increasingly smug. "It appears the judge isn't coming," he observed, glancing at the clock on the wall. Perhaps he reconsidered his position. "He'll be here," Phoebe insisted, though doubt was beginning to creep in. What if something had happened to delay the judge? What if Blackwell had interfered with his journey somehow? At 12:45, Sullivan cleared his throat awkwardly. "Miss Vance, I'm afraid if Judge Porter doesn't arrive soon, I'll have to make a ruling based on the evidence before me." "Which includes Dr. Green's statement retracting his witness," Jenkins added smoothly. Phoebe felt panic rising within her. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't lose her father's ranch to a man like Blackwell. Just as Sullivan was about to speak again, the door to the land office burst open, and an elderly man in a rumpled suit hurried in, looking flustered. "Judge Porter," Phoebe exclaimed, relief washing over her. The judge spotted her and made his way over, nodding to Sullivan. "Apologies for the delay. Train had mechanical troubles outside of town. Had to hire a carriage for the last few miles." Blackwell's triumphant expression faltered slightly. "Judge Porter, how convenient that you've arrived just in time." Porter fixed Blackwell with a stern gaze. "Nothing convenient about it, Blackwell. Wouldn't have had to come at all if you weren't trying to steal this girl's property." Sullivan cleared his throat. "Judge Porter, we have a situation regarding the witnessing of James Vance's will. Dr. Green has provided a statement claiming his signature was forged." Porter's bushy eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Forged? That's preposterous. Samuel and I both signed that will at James's bedside. I watched him do it with my own eyes." "Dr. Green says differently," Jenkins interjected. "Then Dr. Green is lying," Porter replied bluntly. "And I'd wager a month's salary that his sudden change of heart has something to do with the money he owes certain parties after last month's poker game in Golden." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of something, Judge?" "Not directly," Porter replied with a thin smile. "But it does seem curious that Samuel would suddenly remember he didn't witness a will he most certainly did sign." Sullivan looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Judge Porter, would you be willing to provide a sworn statement confirming your witness of the will?" "Absolutely," Porter replied without hesitation. "And more than that, I have something else that might interest you." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. "After I received Miss Vance's telegram, I visited James's lawyer in Silver Creek. He provided me with a copy of the will filed with his office as a precaution against exactly this kind of situation." Phoebe gasped as Porter handed the document to Sullivan. "A copy? I had no idea one existed." Sullivan examined the paper carefully. "This appears to be in order. It has both witness signatures and matches the content of the damaged original." Blackwell's face darkened with anger. That copy could easily have been forged after the fact. "It's dated and notarized, Mr. Blackwell," Sullivan pointed out, "and bears the seal of Silver Creek's legal office." "This is ridiculous," Blackwell sputtered. "One witness says the signature is genuine, one says it's forged. At best, it's a stalemate." "Not quite," Porter interjected. "I took the liberty of bringing this as well." He produced another document. "This is a letter from James Vance to the Silver Creek Bank, dated just 2 weeks before his death, explicitly stating his intention to leave all his property to his daughter and instructing the bank to extend her credit should she need it after his passing." Sullivan took the letter, reading it carefully before looking up at Blackwell. "Mr. Blackwell, in light of this additional evidence, I'm inclined to accept the validity of James Vance's will. Unless you have concrete proof of forgery, not just Dr. Green's statement, I must rule in Miss Vance's favor." Blackwell's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over, Sullivan. The territorial governor will hear about this." "Feel free to appeal to him," Sullivan replied calmly. "But in the meantime, I'm registering the Vance Ranch in Miss Phoebe Vance's name, effective immediately." The defeat in Blackwell's eyes was quickly masked by cold fury. He turned to Phoebe, his voice low and threatening. "You'll regret this, girl. No woman can run that ranch alone, and no man worth his salt will work for you. You'll be begging me to buy you out within a year." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Ethan said quietly, stepping closer to Phoebe. "Some men value justice over bullying." Blackwell sneered at him. "And what would a drifter know about justice or loyalty? You'll be gone with the next breeze, leaving her to face the consequences alone." Ethan's expression remained impassive, but Phoebe noticed his hands clench into fists at his sides. "We'll see about that." With a final glare, Blackwell stormed out of the land office, his son and lawyer trailing behind him. As the door slammed shut, Phoebe felt her knees weaken with relief. Judge Porter steadied her with a gentle hand. "Your father would be proud, girl. You stood your ground just like he taught you." "Thank you, Judge," Phoebe said, fighting back tears. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Nonsense. You're James's daughter through and through, stubborn as a mule and twice as determined." The judge smiled kindly. "Now let's finish this paperwork so you can get back to that ranch of yours. I imagine Pedro and the boys are eager for your return." An hour later, the registration was complete. Sullivan handed Phoebe the official documents, now properly filed and stamped. "It's done, Miss Vance. The ranch is legally yours." Phoebe accepted the papers with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for your fairness and patience." Sullivan nodded. "Just doing my job, madam, though I'd advise caution dealing with Blackwell in the future. Men like that don't take defeat graciously." "I'll remember that," Phoebe assured him. Outside the land office, Judge Porter bid them farewell, promising to check on Dr. Green upon his return to Silver Creek. "That man needs help, not punishment," he remarked sagely. "Blackwell likely exploited his weakness, but Samuel's a good man at heart." As the judge departed for his return journey, Phoebe and Ethan were left standing on the busy Denver street, the future suddenly wide open before them. "We did it," Phoebe said, still somewhat in disbelief. "You did it," Ethan corrected gently. "I just helped along the way." Phoebe shook her head. "I couldn't have managed without you, Ethan. Not just the practical help, but having someone believe in me, stand by me. It meant everything." Ethan's expression softened. "You're easy to believe in, Phoebe Vance." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "So," Phoebe said finally, "what happens now?" Ethan looked down the bustling street, then back at her. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether your job offer still stands." Phoebe's heart skipped a beat. "It does. Though I should warn you, I can be a demanding boss." A slow smile spread across Ethan's face, warming his eyes. "I think I can handle it. And what about your drifting ways? I wouldn't want to tie down a man who's meant to roam." Ethan took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Some men drift because they're looking for something, others because they're running from something. I think maybe I've been doing a bit of both." "And now?" Phoebe asked, barely breathing. "Now I'm thinking maybe I've found what I've been looking for." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "If you'll have me, that is, not just as a ranch hand." Phoebe smiled up at him, her heart full. "I think that could be arranged, Mr. Abernathy." as Ethan lowered his head to kiss her. Right there on the busy Denver street, Phoebe knew that her cart rolling into that creek had been the luckiest accident of her life. The journey back to Silver Creek was considerably more pleasant than the journey to Denver had been. With her cart repaired, her ranch secured, and Ethan by her side, Phoebe found herself enjoying the spring landscape in a way she hadn't before. The mountains seemed grander, the sky bluer, the wildflowers more vibrant. "You're smiling," Ethan observed as they made camp on the second night of their return journey. "Am I?" Phoebe replied innocently, though she could feel the smile he mentioned tugging at her lips. "I suppose I have reason to." "Several reasons, I'd hope," Ethan said, moving to sit beside her by the fire. Phoebe leaned against him, savoring the solid warmth of his shoulder. "Definitely several." They had spent the past 2 days getting to know each other better, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their futures. Ethan told her about his years of drifting, the places he'd seen and people he'd met. Phoebe shared memories of growing up on the ranch, learning its operations from her father, and her determination to make it thrive despite the challenges. "You think Blackwell will cause more trouble?" she asked, voicing the concern that had lingered at the back of her mind. Ethan considered the question seriously. "He might try. Men like that don't take defeat well, but with the deed legally registered in your name, his options are limited. And he now knows you're not alone." Phoebe nodded, taking comfort in his words and presence. "I've been thinking about expanding the operation, maybe adding sheep to the north pastures. Father always said diversification was the key to surviving the bad years." "Smart man," Ethan agreed. "The wool market is strong right now. You know about sheep ranching?" "Worked on a sheep operation in Wyoming for a season. They're not as dumb as cattle ranchers like to claim." Phoebe laughed. "Don't let Pedro hear you say that. He's convinced sheep are one step above rocks in intelligence." Ethan smiled, slipping an arm around her waist. "I'll keep that opinion to myself then." They arrived at the Vance ranch late on the third day, the setting sun casting long shadows across the familiar buildings and fields. Pedro and his sons, Miguel and Tomas, came out to greet them, their relief at Phoebe's return evident. "Señorita Phoebe." "Gracias a Dios," Pedro exclaimed, helping her down from the cart. "We were worried when those men came asking questions." "Everything's fine now, Pedro," Phoebe assured him. "The deed is registered in my name. The ranch is secure." Pedro's weathered face broke into a wide smile. "This is good news." "And who is this?" he asked, looking at Ethan with undisguised curiosity. "This is Ethan Abernathy," Phoebe said, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "He'll be joining us. He's an experienced ranch hand." The knowing look Pedro gave her suggested he understood there was more to it than that, but he simply nodded and offered Ethan his hand. "Welcome, Señor Abernathy. Any friend of Señorita Phoebe is welcome here." Ethan shook Pedro's hand firmly. "Thank you. I look forward to working with you." The following week saw Ethan integrating seamlessly into life at the Vance Ranch. He worked alongside Pedro and his sons, mending fences, tending cattle, and making improvements to the buildings. His experience and skills quickly earned him the respect of the others, and his suggestions for improving operations were met with enthusiasm. More importantly, his relationship with Phoebe deepened with each passing day. They worked side by side during daylight hours and spent evenings on the porch, watching the sunset and planning for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in companionable silence, Ethan whittling or Phoebe mending, content in each other's presence. Word spread through the valley that Phoebe Vance had not only secured her father's ranch, but had found a partner who shared her vision for its future. The same neighbors who had once whispered that a woman couldn't run a ranch alone now watched with grudging admiration as the Vance property flourished under their joint management. Blackwell, true to his nature, made one final attempt to undermine Phoebe's position. He approached several merchants in Silver Creek, attempting to organize a boycott of Vance beef. But the community, impressed by Phoebe's determination and perhaps tired of Blackwell's bullying tactics, refused to cooperate. When the summer cattle auction came, Vance beef commanded top prices. On a warm evening in late August, Phoebe and Ethan sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. The day had been productive: a new calf born, repairs completed on the north fence line, and plans finalized for the addition of a small flock of sheep come spring. "I had a letter from Judge Porter today," Phoebe mentioned, leaning her head against Ethan's shoulder. Dr. Green confessed that Blackwell had threatened to expose his gambling debts if he didn't recant his witness statement. "The judge says Green is getting help now, attending meetings with other men who struggle with gambling." "That's good," Ethan said. "Green seems like a decent man who made poor choices." Phoebe nodded. The judge also mentioned that Blackwell's influence in the valley is waning. "Two smaller ranches he'd been pressuring have refused his offers, citing our success as inspiration." Ethan smiled, taking her hand in his. "Your success. This was your fight from the beginning." "Our success," Phoebe corrected gently. "I couldn't have done this without you, Ethan. Not just the practical help, but having someone who believes in me, who sees me as an equal. That's been the greatest gift." Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. "Phoebe Vance, meeting you has been the best thing that ever happened to me. All those years of drifting, I was looking for somewhere to belong, someone to belong to. I just didn't know it until my path crossed yours." Phoebe's heart raced as she recognized the intensity in his eyes. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Mr. Abernathy?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I've been carrying this around for a week, waiting for the right moment." He opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small, sparkling diamond. "I carved the box myself, but I figured you deserved a proper ring." Tears welled in Phoebe's eyes as Ethan slid from the swing onto one knee before her. "Phoebe Vance, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Phoebe's smile was radiant through her tears. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, with all my heart." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Phoebe thought of that rainy day when her cart had rolled into the creek and a stranger had promised she'd rest by a fire soon enough. How could she have known then that she wasn't just finding shelter for a night, but a home for a lifetime? The following spring, Phoebe and Ethan were married beneath the old oak tree where generations of Vances had celebrated life's milestones. Judge Porter officiated with Pedro, Miguel, and Tomas standing as witnesses. Even Dr. Green attended, sober and grateful for the second chance the community had given him. The ranch flourished under their joint care, expanding to include not just the sheep Phoebe had envisioned, but also a small orchard and beehives that produced honey sought after throughout the territory. They hired additional handsmen who respected Phoebe's knowledge and authority, and built a reputation for fair dealings and quality stock. 2 years after their wedding, Phoebe gave birth to a son they named James, after her father. The boy grew strong and curious, toddling after his parents as they went about their daily tasks, absorbing the rhythms and routines of ranch life, just as Phoebe had done as a child. On the 5th anniversary of the day Phoebe's cart had rolled into the creek, they sat on the same porch swing, now with 3-year-old James asleep in Ethan's lap and a new baby daughter, Elizabeth, cradled in Phoebe's arms. Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if my cart hadn't gone into that creek? Phoebe asked, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan smiled, gently stroking his son's hair. I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be. Phoebe leaned over to kiss him softly. Like a stubborn woman and a drifting cowboy, exactly like that, Ethan agreed, his eyes reflecting the love that had grown stronger with each passing day. Exactly like that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Phoebe Vance Abernathy looked out over the land that had been her birthright and the family that was her choice, knowing with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world and the man she was meant to share it with. In the years that followed, the Vance Abernathy Ranch became one of the most respected in Colorado territory. Their innovative approaches to ranching, combining cattle, sheep, and sustainable farming practices, set new standards that others soon followed. Phoebe and Ethan's partnership, both in marriage and in business, demonstrated that the strongest foundations were built on mutual respect and shared vision. James and Elizabeth grew up knowing the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the strength that comes from loving deeply. They absorbed their mother's determination and their father's steady patience, traits that would serve them well as they eventually took their own places in managing the family legacy. And on cool evenings, when the work was done and the children were settled, Phoebe and Ethan would often return to that same porch swing, their hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge above the land they both loved, grateful for the chance meeting that had changed everything when her cart rolled into the creek, and the cowboy said she'd rest by the fire soon enough.